the only road we've ever known. This is that moment where I wait for it, where I wait and I got to see it. I got to see it. I am the doubting Thomas of technology. Yeah, I get it. You're saying we're online, but until I see it on the stream, I take nothing for granted. Nothing at all. There it is. I've seen it. I have seen it, and it is good. And that is spectacular. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon, good evening, good day, good morning. If you're in my time zone, we're doing morning last. My guest is not in my time zone. I'm Ron Placone. This is Get Your News On with Ron. A lot's going on. Let's thank the people that make this show possible first. First of all, our friends over at ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Their tea kind of rules. It's awesome tea. I've been enjoying my new kick is the Chinese oolong that they have. It is spectacular, and I've been drinking it. And I talked to the ZT owner Jeffrey, who is a friend of the show, good lefty, and we might be doing a Ron Placone tea soon. More information as it becomes available. But we may have figured out a way to do a Ron Placone tea. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. Of course, I'll be announcing it. But in the meantime, you can get their tea wholesale because of the pandemic. Please do that. ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Their tea kind of rules. They supply the tea to Get Your News On with Ron. Triageoil.com. Our friends over at Triage Oil, TRIAGE oil.com. They make pain oil. Trendy name, makes amazing pain oil that you rub on your body, and it works wonders. You guys know it has been such a game changer for my neck. I can do this with my neck now. I know you're thinking, Ron, you couldn't. Yeah. I was in an accident in 2013, a car accident, and I didn't go to a chiropractor. I didn't really get checked out the way I should have because, healthcare is great in the USA, and I've always struggled a little bit with my neck since then. And this pain oil has done wonders for it. So check them out over at triageoil.com. Also, do you like some CBD in your drink? Are you a CBD oil user? Well, I got you covered. Rare Naturals with an S, CBD.com. You can get CBD oil. You can put it under your tongue, put it in your drink. It relaxes you. It calms your anxiety, which these are anxious times, folks. It'll help you sleep. It'll help if you feel a headache coming on. I use it for all those reasons. Different people use it for different stuff. Some people just like it after a workout to kind of relax them, relax their muscles. It works for that. It really helps soothe you, helps relax you, helps you just kind of be at ease a little bit, and it's all natural. So rarenaturalcbd.com. If you're a CBD oil user, please do get your CBD oil here, because here's the best part. You can use the promo code Lucy at checkout and get 30% off your order. Some people, they use CBD oil every day. If you're one of those people, get it at rarenaturalcbd.com and use the promo code Lucy at checkout to save 30%. Why wouldn't you do that? It's a win-win. And if you've never tried CBD oil, I recommend giving it a shot. Rare Naturals with an S, CBD.com. Check out a bottle. Use the promo code Lucy at checkout for 30% off. All right. Having blabbered all that, I'm going to bring in my guest today. This guy is, he's in Vermont. He has a heck of a story. We're going to get into some of his backstory. And another interesting thing about him, he is running for Congress as a communist, which has not been done in decades. Please welcome to the show, Chris Halali. What's up, Chris?
What's up? Thank you for having me.
Good to. Oh, and by the way, I should have mentioned, good to have you, first of all, but also I forgot to mention, you are a viewer request. A viewer requested you. They emailed me about you. And I checked out your website and I read your backstory, and I'm like, yeah, I for sure want to talk to this dude. This seems like a really interesting guy that I would like to have on my show, or just have a beer with and kind of just talk about the world with him. So we get to do that. So thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you.
So let's go to a little breaking news first. We're gonna do a couple stories of the day. Then we're gonna get into you. But so folks, we are going to hear a verdict around Breonna Taylor today. And it may even be during the recording of this. Who knows? If anything breaking happens, please say something in the chat, because we might not know. So please say something in the chat. But we are going to hear a verdict today. It is likely not going to be good. And what I mean by that is that they are likely going to let these cops off. There has been some stuff on Twitter of people saying they have insider information from the LAPD or similar organizations that is saying that they're going to let the cops who murdered Breonna Taylor off. It's hard to verify any information. And of course, the corporate media has been silent as expected. But here's something we also know. They have declared a state of emergency in Louisville already. And they're sending cops in, they're sending guards in. So here's what's happening so far. Louisville mayor declares state of emergency as downtown access is cut off. Louisville officials say they don't know when a decision from the attorney general is coming in regards to Breonna Taylor, but the city is restricting downtown access and taking other actions. So they're already declaring a state of emergency. They're already shutting it down. And they're saying this is, quote, due to the potential for civil unrest. So chances are pretty good. Chances are pretty high based on everything that's been floating around the blogosphere, all of the potentially leaked information that's out there. I say potentially because I personally have not been able to verify anything with 100% accuracy. These are just people on Twitter. But it looks like they're likely going to get off. I heard that the family was offered a pretty sizable settlement, and they're probably going to get off without charge. My prediction, based on these preemptive measures taken by Louisville, I have a feeling, they're going to get off without charge, just like pretty much 99% of officer-involved murders. So, Chris, what do you think? Do you predict something different?
No, I predict the same. This is just the same old in this country. There's a long history, a long bloody history of terror against people of color, and what we're seeing right now is the Black working class, along with really an intersectional movement of people, all races, all genders, all identities, out in the streets fighting against, the racism, the systemic racism that's in this country, and of course, it's being demonized. It's being demonized by a lot of mainstream voices on the right. And also on the liberal wing, especially the corporate liberal wing of the Democratic Party. And I think everybody just has to get on the streets. I think I'm the only congressional candidate who has been out to the BLM protests in Burlington. We protested close by here at the Vermont Law School months ago when the state-sanctioned murder of George Floyd happened. We've been out on the streets and we've been saying, and we're not looting. There's no violence. There's nothing like that going on. We're simply saying, justice, we want justice, and that's what should be had.
That's been my experience too, protesting. It has been 100% peaceful, and I was at the protest in Beverly Hills that there was some violence that happened there, and I've said it before on this show. I'll say it again. It was 100% peaceful. Like it felt like a folk festival, not even just a music festival, Chris, like an actual folk festival, like the most peaceful of the peaceful. Then all of a sudden the cops showed up.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, and again, I talked about this the day after it happened, but I was just walking around. It was an entirely peaceful protest. They had all these cars left there, all these police cars just left unattended. Intentionally hoping somebody would do something. And I even saw people, I saw some people threw stuff at the cop cars, and other people said, don't do that, stop doing that. They stopped the people from doing that because they were like, look, that's what they want. They want to crack our heads. They want us to do something to this car so they can start cracking our heads. Don't do it. Then all of a sudden, there was this random cop car on fire. And it looked, there's no way, like this idea that it randomly happened is just so, because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's this cop car. The windows were busted out. It was spray painted and it was just on fire. Mm-hmm. And no one knew where it came from. No one, but then all of a sudden the cops just start cracking heads, and that's what happened.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And they're claiming that protesters did that, but I don't know how, from my perspective. I don't know how or where that could have happened from my perspective as someone who was marching there. Mm-hmm. Could I see the entirety of everything that was going on? Well, of course not. That's physically impossible. But it's just all these randomly placed cop cars were there. And then all of a sudden, there's this one. It's very bizarre to say the very least. And when you see every single person in every single city that has the same story, there was no violence until the cops showed up. Gee, I'm finding a common thread here.
Yeah, and you know more than anyone else, the ruling class and its lackeys have always had agent provocateurs. There's always been people embedded in protests to get them violent, to derail them, so that the state can crack down and change public opinion. Because, for example, most people are, yes, of course, we want justice. Most people have dignity and say, yeah, of course, there should be just some level of justice. But of course, when you have provocateurs going out there, burning, looting, who knows what's going on? Who knows who's behind them? But from history, we know full well, not only in this country, all over. 1953 in Iran, the overthrow of Mossadegh. It was the CIA and MI6-backed lackeys that were out there, protesting, demonstrating, beating people up, wearing the clothes of the Iranian Communist Party, the Tudeh party. And then, of course, everyone blamed them after. And they didn't know that actually was the CIA and MI6 goons that were out there who were paid for. So a lot of the stuff, we went to a demonstration, and in the distance, we heard semi-automatic gunfire, and people were very unnerved by the whole thing. They said, no, we're not doing this, and because it's a rural area. So people, were out there protesting. People drove by fast, yelling slogans and things like that. We were peaceful, just holding up signs, being respectful to everybody around. I haven't seen any violence in any of the demonstrations I've been in. None. I've seen a lot of attempted violence or intimidation from other people who knows who they are. But I haven't seen anything from local protesters. No way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just been the same story. And here you have Louisville. They already got it on lockdown because chances are there's going to be a verdict that a lot of people are going to be very, very unhappy with. There's also speculation out there that the officers themselves, the officers who murdered Breonna Taylor, that they've been writing to their colleagues, expressing joy, basically, like they know what's coming. So yeah, I mean, again, we're not going to know for sure probably until the end of this show. If anything's breaking, please say something in the chat because, we're not going to see it. But chances are the murderers who murdered Breonna Taylor are going to get off without charge. That's likely what's going to happen. And this is a systemic thing. This is how they always do it. Usually what they do is they just draw the court process out so long so that it falls out of the public eye before they give a verdict. And we have so many police murders where police are murdering people that there's a new one every week. And they want to numb the society to it. I mean, I had an instance happen to me on Instagram where I posted a screenshot of a tweet I made about Anthony McClain, who was murdered in my neighborhood in Pasadena. And somebody was defending the cops. They were defending the cops, and they were defending a different shooting that happened earlier that week. They didn't know. There's so many of them. They don't even know. They don't even know which cops' boots they're licking at this point. They don't even know which boots they're licking. They don't even know which mental gymnastics they're giving it for. They have to keep the propaganda in their head. Oh, wait, I accidentally gave the propaganda for Elijah instead of Anthony. Mm-hmm. Oops.
Yep.
It's unreal.
It really is. It really is. And I think that unless you have broad systemic change, unless you really have a popular mobilization in this country to change the system, we're not going to see anything different.
Oh, yeah. Really you can't. Won't. Whenever people say police reform, I'm like, no. Way too little, way too late. No. You can't. No. And when you think about it, the fact that the job itself exists is absolutely lunacy. Like a police officer as we know it. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any law and order in a society, but a police officer as we know it, it's an absolutely ridiculous job for anyone to have. It's that they have this kind of overarching authority. They receive incredibly poor training. They have a license to kill. A lot of them suffer from PTSD that goes unchecked. A lot of them are KKK members. That goes unchecked because the screening process is incredibly poor. Why is the same person who might pull you over for a busted taillight the same person who might respond to a live shooter situation? That makes zero sense. It's absolutely insane. It's not safe for anybody involved, literally anybody. We should completely revisit and reinvent what it means to have law enforcement in our lives and acknowledge the fact that a police officer as we know it shouldn't exist.
I agree. And actually, I talk to a lot of people out here. I live in a rural area. We don't even have a police presence in my town.
I'm
There's
moving.
No police station. There's nothing. And
send me your zip code. I'm moving there.
Whenever we see a police car, everybody asks questions. What's going on? Why are they here? We don't want them here. Get out. This kind of stuff.
I like your community already, man.
I'm telling you, it's wonderful. And
you live on a farm. Do you have a guest house? I'm moving.
Absolutely. Come on over.
Awesome. Yes.
We have justices of the peace, and a lot of people have the conversation to say, why do we even need them? Why are we paying for them? What good do they serve? They really don't. They don't do anything. And everybody has jokes about the local police in the town over. But I think one of the big things that I can talk to people, rural people in Burlington or Montpelier, and I can say, look, why do police have to have military-grade equipment? What's the fear?
Kidding.
What's happening? And especially here, we can have jokes. We can say the cow got loose from the neighbor farm, and it's like running loose, and somehow the police officer needs the M16. Like, what the hell does that have anything to do with it? Why do they need that? Why do they need tanks? Why do they need, in one of the towns just about 25 minutes away, they have a Stingray. I guess it's this device they put on top of the police car, the roof, and it can take all of the cell. It like basically acts as a cell tower, and it can take all the messages and pings that are coming in at it, and it basically cloaks itself to do intelligence gathering. And I said, why? What are they gathering? Can you bring some eggs from the chicken coop? Or, we don't even have service up here for cell phones. I don't even understand why they have this stuff. But for sure, number one, you demilitarize the police. Stop the training in Israel and things like that. Why are police going to get trained in Israel and counter terrorism? What terrorism do we have here? The only terrorism I see is from the right wing. How people forget so quickly. Timothy McVeigh. What the hell?
When we have domestic terrorism, I guess in police training, they're trained to take them to Burger King.
Exactly.
I guess they're trained at like what they did with Dylan Roof. They took him to Burger King after he killed 9 people. Now, in fairness, Chris, to be totally fair here, I mean, I do think that if you got to rescue a cow, a tank could come in handy. I mean, because you could give the cow a ride, you just kind of
be a roadblock.
Yeah, just kind of scoop the cow up with the thing, and then like give the cow a ride back to the pasture and be like, here you go, buddy, roam around.
I'm telling you, it's a lot of people agree, even across the political spectrum. Like when you really talk to people around here, and you said, and of course, I always preface it by saying, police officers, probably most of them are decent human beings, good family people. It's the uniform I have a problem with. It's the authority I have a problem with. It's the badge and the gun and all this stuff. Why? Why can't we have more counselors, more therapists, more justice of the peace, more community control over how we do things? And why can't the police be under community control? What's wrong with that? I always say, everybody says democracy. Well, that's democratic. The police are the people's authority, right?
Exactly.
We can have oversight.
We need to have community oversight. I don't subscribe to the whole like, well, they're good people, because to me, that's just you're just playing into a straw man. That's the way I see it. The whole like, well, just a couple bad apples. First of all, no, it's a systemic problem. To address I know that's not what you're saying. I'm just saying like to me, it's like taking, if we had an E. coli outbreak, taking one shred of lettuce and be like, this shred's fine, I'm going to eat it. Like, that's not the point. That's not the point. It's a systemic problem, and you need to treat it as such. And just like going one individual at a time, that doesn't address the systemic problem. Because a lot of cops, if they do go into the force with good intentions, they get weeded out really quick.
I agree with you.
I mean, I've talked to some former cops before. I mean, I've met them, and I remember, I'll never forget it. I had this long conversation with this guy. He used to be a cop. He had to leave, and because he had integrity as a human being. And I remember, and this was years ago when I was a little more idealistic than I am now. I mean, I was in my early 20s, and I said, man, I just think that there are some cops that are like you or were like you, and they had good intentions. But if I had to take a guess, I'd say for every one cop like you, there's 3 who aren't. And he looked at me and he said, "You're being way too fucking generous."
You see, there you go.
Said he's trying 9 out of 10, and even that's being a little too. And I'm like, all right, man, all right. And I never forgot that. And that was when I always I'm like, no, if you want to we have to talk about a systemic problem like a systemic problem.
I agree with you. Absolutely, without a doubt.
So everybody brace yourselves. The people who murdered Breonna Taylor, they're probably going to be let off because this is a systemic disease. But, speaking of Black Lives Matter, Chris, there's another story I wanted to talk about today that involves a Black Lives Matter hero and a true hero of the resistance, Mitt Romney.
Oh, Mitt.
No, Mitt Romney. So for anyone who doesn't know what that refers to, Mitt Romney, of course, he did show up at one protest, took a photo op, and then I'm imagining he left. And all of a sudden, in the Twitterverse, he's some resistance hero now. He also said a couple things about Trump being unpleasant in the past.
He was wearing a mask too.
And he wore a mask. He wore a mask. Good call, Chris. Right. So everybody was thinking that, well, they need a couple Republicans to kind of get on board with saying we don't want to vote in another Supreme Court justice until after the election. Let's see what the election does. And they were hoping for their resistance hero, Mitt Romney, to have their back. Well, guess what, folks? Romney backs vote on Supreme Court nominee, clearing the way for Trump. Senator Mitt Romney said Tuesday he would support a floor vote to replace the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, essentially clinching consideration of President Donald Trump's nominee this year, despite the impending election. Now, if you're one of these people who gave Mitt Romney the benefit of the doubt because he took a photo op, you're a chump. And you've probably been a chump about a bunch of other things. You've probably been a chump about Mueller. You've probably been a chump about John Bolton. And I know that it's really hard because we're raised in a society where there's good guys and there's bad guys. And if Trump's a bad guy, which he is, and Mitt Romney said Trump's not very nice, then Mitt Romney must be a good guy. But for those of us who don't subscribe to themes that you're taught when you're 5 years old and then you freaking grow up, we realize that sometimes there's just bad guys in a situation. And hopefully you learned this life lesson. Not you, Chris, but, the metaphorical you.
Oh yeah, Mitt Romney's being hailed was being hailed as a hero before. Oh, we went to BLM. He's during the impeachment, this, that. He's against Trump. Part of the resistance. And of course, now, what did you expect? He's still a Republican. He still has to contest for his seat. He's going to have an election at some point. And of course, he's gotta play ball. And I'm sure they take him into the back room and they say, okay, Mitt, you did a good job. You said a few things. You went to a protest. You're wearing the mask, but now you gotta vote this way. And they pressured him. I'm sure. And the guy is just that way anyway. I mean, he was governor of Massachusetts when I was living there. I mean, he's a Republican. What do you want to say? I mean, this is just what powers that be in a corporate estate do. It's nothing, nothing super bizarre.
They rely on people's amnesia. They rely on people. And I think it's also a reflection of people are so conditioned to expect the absolute bare minimum that Nancy Pelosi is somehow fighting for them because she rips up a sheet of paper. Mitt Romney is somehow fighting for people because he gets a photo op at a protest. and then just ignore everybody's voting record. Just ignore everybody's voting record.
While she's eating artisanal ice cream.
Right. She's eating her ice cream. She tore up the paper so she could wet it and wipe down some of the sticky parts in her $12,000 freezer.
Well, she helped pass a bigger defense budget for Trump, the most dangerous president in U.S. history. And everybody's saying, "Oh my God, he's so dangerous," but we'll give him more money for regime change, for war, for drones.
How about Adam Schiff, who screams at that guy made himself a political celebrity over Russiagate. Screamed at the top of his lungs that Trump is this traitor. Trump is this. He votes to expand Trump's spying powers.
Of course.
Either you don't give a shit about the people who live here if you think that this treasonous traitor is going to spy on people, or you're just full of shit. You're just bullshitting.
They
and
are.
You're just another CIA approved lackey.
That's it. And you know what? I put a picture on my on my Twitter actually, where some people they forgot about the picture. You know, a general amnesia these days. And it was a Trump and a Melania next to Hillary and Bill Clinton, all together, wearing the nice tuxedo and clothes. You know, I didn't think it was a wedding that they were at. And then one with Obama and Bush Senior, Bush, his son, and of course they're all together. It's a big club, like George Carlin said. None of us are in it. It's all a ruse for us. Plus, they're not really the ones in power. The corporations are in power. The lobbyists, the massive industries that really make the fortune. They're just the rubber stamp for a lot of the capitalism mechanisms that just continue on they're not elected. Nobody elects them, but they get all the rubber stamp. Oh, you want a contract? All right, Jeff Bezos, here's a defense contract. You know, all right, Bill Gates, here's a defense contract. And then they play them off each other as if, Jeff Bezos has Washington Post and, democracy dies in darkness. Well, wait, aren't you the one taking all these defense contracts and making all these drones? And come on.
Democracy dies in darkness, and they're doing what they can to help.
Absolutely. They're turning off the lights. They're turning off the power.
That's the real slogan. Yeah, I think it's so funny because if you're a billionaire and you really want to change the world for the better, the last thing you would ever do is run for president. That's why Tom Steyer is a total scam. It doesn't matter how nice he is to Bernie or how cute his tie is. He's a total fraud. He destroyed the environment that now he's trying to fix. He got rich destroying it. Now he's saying he wants to fix it. If you're a billionaire, there are so many things you could do to help the environment. So many things that you could do that would cost you really very little. But he's not interested in doing any of those things. So he's a total fraud. But then it's like, wow, this guy's a big asshole. But then you had Howard Schultz come in and he's like, you think he's an asshole? Look at me. I'm an even bigger asshole. Let me tell you how you can't have health care. And then everyone's like, wow, this guy's an even bigger asshole. I don't think this guy got rich off of selling coffee-themed milkshakes to people. I don't think I want to even go there anymore. And then Mike Bloomberg shows up and he goes, you think that guy's an asshole? Here I am, mega asshole Magoo, straight up oligarch, stop and frisk guy. Here I am. And they're like, yeah, he's an even, wow, like the asshole train just keeps rolling. And then somewhere in a cave, somewhere that you and I don't even know about, Chris, Jeff Bezos is just sitting there sinisterly petting a cat or something. And he goes, oh, you think they're assholes? Wait until I'm installed emperor. It's coming, baby.
Coming. I think he's set up to be like the first trillionaire. Who knows? People have been joking about that, but who knows? I mean,
he's en route to be the first trillionaire. He's en route to be the first trillionaire while people wait in line for food all of the Great Depression. You know what that's called, Chris? A failed state. That's what that is. We both know that.
It's capitalism. That's it. Here we go. Business as usual.
So let's talk about you. I'm excited to talk about you. So you are, you mentioned to me in your email that it's been decades since anyone has ever run as a communist. So when was the actual last time? Do you know? Like,
I think it was 96.
96.
There have been a few people who've been with the Communist Party USA who've run in in their states and had communists on the ballot. But the last big national one was in 1984. I know they made a joke of that in the press. 1984. I'm like, guys, get over it. It was Gus Hall and Angela Davis. And that was the last time that they were on the ballot as president and vice president for the Communist Party USA. So it's the first time since 1984 here in Vermont that a communist has been on the ballot as a communist.
So when you say you're a communist, because again, all of these terms have been reassociated, they get redefined daily to the point where you don't even know what exactly they mean anymore. But they're still important to an extent because it's something to it's a catalyst. It's something that it's a jumping off point. So they're still important. So when you say you're a communist, what does that mean to you?
So ideologically, I'm a Marxist Leninist, which means that I'm firmly placed within the Marxist tradition. And then the development of that, which came with Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917, that continuation that then created the Third International and the International Communist Movement. So that's where I find myself. So I defend the historical legacy of the USSR, even with all of the things that happened that I disagree with over there, and the bad things that happen. I defend many of the other socialist states that continue to exist to this day, like Cuba, Vietnam, Laos, China, the DPRK. I've been a Marxist Leninist. I grew up that way. I moved into anarchism and Maoism for a period of time, but I've returned back to a strong Marxist Leninist position. So I'm back where I started, really.
So I admittedly don't know all of the details here. I mean, I've read the Communist Manifesto, and I've read a couple volumes of Capital, Das Kapital. But I'm not. I mean, when you get into Maoism and stuff like that, I'm a little foggier. I'm not a connoisseur. I'm not totally hip to it. So a lot of those details I'm not aware of. So I'm learning. In our conversation, I'm learning. So that's not the school of thought that's like against sex, is it?
I mean, that's against sex? No. There
Okay.
have been like extreme variations of everything, of course.
No. I understand that. That's why that's why I'm telling you I'm not familiar, so I'm learning. So if any of my questions are kind of elementary, I apologize in advance.
But... No problem. There have been, for example, that might come from, for example, there have been guerrilla movements that have barred their guerrillas from engaging in sexual intercourse or sexual relations to strengthen their guerrilla armies and things like that have been with both men and women. So that's been a historical thing that has happened. But or like in some really strong cadre parties, they've sort of pushed that historically. But no, of course, there's no sex position from me or from our party.
You're for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. So when you say you defend, the USSR and stuff like that, are you basically saying I defend the principles while still recognizing historical mistakes in the execution?
Sure, of course, absolutely.
Okay.
And also, as with everything, we can look at the historical mistakes, and I think that the record has been, it's the CIA has gotten in there, our, media.
Well, domestically, absolutely.
So
very much so domestically.
A lot of things that we sort of think about when we think of the Soviet Union, like all these massive concentration camps, the Gulag system, and all these millions killed and things. Well, actually, when historians go to the archives and check the numbers, they're like, well, how did you come up with a number like that? And they realize, oh, well, we looked at population trends and this, and it's like, well, you can't really look at that and then say all these people died if it's a population trend. It's like there's a lot of mistakes that have happened. There's a lot of just overall number, grossly overestimating the numbers of people who died or who were in camps. The numbers were actually far smaller than we think. We might, in our minds, people in the U.S. are like 100 million died from communism, and you're like, where'd you get that number from? Who's your source? Just like now with the Uyghur thing, I've been to Xinjiang, of course, in China, where the Uyghurs are, and I've been to the major cities, Urumqi, and a couple other cities in the region. And when I went there, I didn't see any camps. I went to mosques, people were praying. I didn't see anything. And then you realize who's pushing this, theory, Adrian Zenz and all these kind of like crazy, victims of Communism Foundation, neocon, right-wingers, evangelicals. And you're like, obviously they're going to push this line of thought. So of course, I come from a tradition, my family were communists in Greece in the 1920s and 30s. My grandfather and his brothers fought in World War II and the Greek Civil War. So of course, we can say that Comrade Stalin made mistakes, but at the end of the day, the Soviet Union won World War II. The Soviet Union literally defeated fascism. Today, we might think in this country that, oh yeah, D-Day and Eisenhower and Patton and no. The USSR was fighting 200 divisions of the Nazi Wehrmacht, while the US and the UK combined were fighting 10. 200. Like almost 80% of all casualties in World War II were on the Eastern Front. So we can look and say, yes, of course, Comrade Lenin made mistakes, Comrade Stalin, Khrushchev, all these people made mistakes. But the legacy of the Soviet Union, the legacy of the first worker state, of the ability to provide for the people, to literally raise a people from serfdom into being the first country to put a man and woman into space in the span of 50 years, really. I mean, that's a huge legacy that has to be defended. Healthcare, education, gender equality, huge transformations of the society. That was all done because of not only of the leaders. Forget about the leaders. It was also from the people themselves, from the Soviet people themselves, from the Chinese people themselves. And so I think that this this legacy has to be, spoken about. It has to be understood, and we should also talk about the bad things that happen. I'm not saying we shouldn't. We should, of course. But we should look and say, what did they do right? What did they get right? What were the amazing things that this project had? And what were the failures, and how can we learn from these failures so we don't repeat them?
Well, in bringing it to the contemporary United States, whether it be communism, socialism, anarchism, we are taught, the collective we in the contemporary United States, we're taught to only focus on the flaws of all of those systems. But with capitalism, we're supposed to ignore the flaws. The biggest and only flaw being it will always be destructive and eat itself. Always, 100% of the time. I mean, with other, with other types of systems, there's wiggle room, and there's ways, where you can kind of put some things in place to kind of prevent authoritarianism from happening. With capitalism, you can't. It's just always going to happen. It's when you have the most powerful people dictate everything. When you have the accumulation of capital, the word freaking capital's in it, and that is your only priority, and that's above all else, the same thing's going to happen 100% of the time. But getting back to communism, so the common argument that you'll hear, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, is, well, I read something like the Communist Manifesto, I read these principles all sound great, but how do you prevent authoritarianism from happening? What's your answer to that question?
Of course, in a Marxist Leninist state, you have democratic centralism, which means that it's actually even, I would say, more democratic. Each neighborhood is organized. I've been to Cuba, and I've been 3 times. I spent months there, and you have each neighborhood, each building has a CDR, a Committee for the Defense of the Revolution. So you have all these organizations, these mass organizations, and they all are part of the democratic process. So they all slowly, everything that people need. If I need something fixed, if I have a need for something in the community, I bring it up, and slowly it goes up the chain to sort of the National Assembly, to all the central committees, and then it comes back down, and all those things are taken care of. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, what's our system like? Our system is I vote occasionally, and the people empowered do whatever the fuck they want, and they're not accountable to anyone. And all right, well, I didn't have as much money as the lobbyists. One of the biggest things to prevent authoritarianism is to have an extremely educated population that's actively engaged in the political process. That's not what we have here. We don't have that here. They don't want that here. They don't want that here. I'm all in favor. Everybody, why not? Free education, everybody should have a PhD. Why not? If you're a janitor, you should be able to know philosophy too, because ultimately you're a janitor that lives in a society with me, you, and everybody else. So I would like to reason with you. You're sitting there in your work and you're thinking, okay, how could this be made? How could this be better? Everybody knows in this society that they're getting fucked in this economic system. Everybody knows it. They don't know how to express it in theoretical terms necessarily, but they say, yeah, the boss is screwing me. I don't have enough money. I can't pay the bills. Okay, we put terms to that. And we say, okay, it's part of this structure. It's part of this system. In educating those people in a socialist society, well, yeah, you'll be part of a whole organization and a structure where you can have control over your own, labor power. And then you can be actively engaged in the political process. I'm not saying that, everybody's going to do politics 24/7. But if you have an educated population, people who care about their neighbors, about their comrades, about the people who live down the street, and about the entire communities at large, well, then, yeah, you can have a much better society. And you will prevent authoritarianism anyway. When they say, for example, Nicolas Maduro is an authoritarian leader. And I went to Venezuela and I went on the ground in 2019, the spring, and I said, I don't really feel that this is any. I feel that the U.S. is more authoritarian. There were police everywhere with machine guns and cruisers with the lights on and the surveillance state. No.
Are you familiar with Max Blumenthal and the Gray Zone? And yeah,
of course.
It was so when everything was going on, they just went there and they're like, so here we are. People are just buying food. And by the way, there's more than one brand of cereal. That's more US propaganda. They're like, oh, if we have socialism, you'll only have one type of cereal.
No, it's so true. It's so true. And when I went to China and I was living there for 2 years, I never felt that I was living in an extremely authoritarian state. I thought, here's more authoritarian. Here, China, they opened the door to me. They let me go to places. They let me see things. Of course, there are police. Protect. There's also over 1 billion people, so you got to make sure people are going on trains every day, buses, things like that. But nobody was armed. I didn't see anybody with weapons, like that. Only in some places around, important government facilities, just like everywhere else in the world. But your common everyday police officer, no, just a radio, the uniform, and that was it. They were, traffic, or if people needed help. Here, oh my God, the FBI has come after me. I was in the DHS leaked document that I have some links with Antifa and, with Brace Belden, TrueAnon. We fought in Syria against ISIS. We come back to this country. Now we're treated as terrorists. So they have links to Antifa. Link them up with foreign powers. It's craziness. This is the real authoritarian state. Capitalist authoritarianism,
So, Chris, I have a kind of weird request. If you could try to not turn your head, because you have a beautiful beard. Whenever you turn your head, your audio gets faint.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Whenever you, so it might be the placement of your mic, but whenever you turn your head, your audio cuts out for a little bit. So if you can do your best to just straight up.
I get too excited.
No, it's good. It's good. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know what's happening. Well, so what would you say, getting back to principles here, what would you say, why are you a communist and not a socialist? What's the differential there from your perspective?
There's lots of differences overall. Sure. First of all, there's multiple schools of communist thought, as you were saying. There's Marxist Leninism, there's Maoism, and then there's all different Hojaism. There's all different theories within there, depending on which theoretical school you follow. And then within socialism, you have a whole wide array of theories. The thing that differentiates socialism and communism in the main sense is that communism, especially in Marxism Leninism, as sort of understood, really that term comes around after Lenin's death with Stalin. But before that, Lenin was basically saying we need a vanguard party, right? We need the most advanced workers, academics, farmers, at that time peasants. Everybody needs to be in this party, and we need to seize state power. And once we seize state power, we have a good collection of people here, and we can bring in all other mass organizations, and then we can redistribute, we can seize the means of production, we can really then build socialism from there. Socialism, different schools of socialist thought, but socialism, especially as understood by Bernstein and others, is really, okay, let's use the bourgeois parliamentary system, let's try to run candidates, let's try to win, and then we'll legislate our way to socialism. Marxism Leninism says you can't legislate your way to socialism. What you have to do is you have to seize the means of production. You have to seize state power, right? Which is why sometimes Marxism Leninism is looked at as something very scary, because everybody thinks that we're going to pull out, AKs and go out there and start, trying to seize everything. That's not necessarily how it happens. And in some situations, it has been rather peaceful without many bullets fired, depending on where you were, which time period, and how the general population was immiserated by the system that preceded it, right? So,
well, how would you foresee it happening here, like where you're at in Vermont? Like what would you foresee happening?
It's a big question. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did, or a Palantir, in Lord of the Rings. I'm not sure. The reason why, for example, I'm running is to change the narrative, change the conversation, and to and to sort of not only demystify, but to push back against all the red baiting and McCarthyism that has gone on in this country since since really the 20s, 30s, and especially after World War II in the Cold War, right? So what I'm trying to do is say communism isn't the big boogeyman, right? Socialism, communism, all these things are not they're not antithetical to what it means to be an American, right? Most people don't know that the International Working Men's Association, of which Karl Marx was a member, wrote a letter to Abraham Lincoln, and Lincoln had his diplomat in London respond to that because they said, "Oh, we hope you win the Civil War, and we hope you continue the American Revolution to then be a workers' revolution." And Abraham Lincoln was very thankful for them putting him so high. If you tell a Republican today that Karl Marx and the other communists wrote a letter to Abraham Lincoln, they might have a mind melt.
Well, when you tell people that communists had their own newspapers in the United States prior to the 20th century, people's brains melt.
Absolutely. Or that it was all these votes.
Right. Well, yeah, because socialists had their own newspapers, communists, federalists, and they all talked to each other and exchanged ideas. Imagine that. And the other thing, and Communist Party USA was, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding of it, but Communist Party USA played an instrumental role in us getting the New Deal because, FDR, people make it out like FDR was this big radical on his own. He really wasn't. He was more of a centrist, but he had the foresight to be like, well, here's what's going to happen. Those people out there, they're really pissed off. So rich friends, you're going to have to give up a little or everything, your pick. And that's kind of why we got a New Deal. And the Communist Party, they weren't the only organization involved by any means, but they were one of the organizations involved. So what you saw happen after that was you saw a very concentrated effort to decimate all those movements, to decimate the workers' unions, to decimate Communist Party USA, to decimate the socialists. And a lot of it was done via McCarthyism.
Absolutely. And, most people don't even realize, everybody's saying, oh, Kamala Harris, woo, first black woman on a major party ticket. Why? Because on the minor party tickets, they've been there. The Communist Party put a black man as vice president in the 1930s. William Z. Foster for president, James Ford, vice president, black in the 1930s. I mean, can you imagine that? And the Communist Party had a poster with both of their pictures and then in a map of the USA, and it's on my website, and it says self-determination for the black belt. I mean, 1930s, we're living in 2020, and everybody thinks this is like all new stuff. No, this is things that we've been fighting for. This is generations now of struggle, right? And then, of course, black women, huge in the communist movement. Black women who were involved with not only the Communist Party, but the Progressive Party when Henry Wallace was involved in the 40s and then early 50s. I mean, the vice presidential candidate was a woman. And of course, you look at this and you say, wow, where have we come from? Where have things come along? Because most people today don't know any of this history at all. They don't realize that, exactly as you're saying, the United States had armed takeovers of entire cities by unions, by communists, and you look at this, you say, wait, what? Yeah, it happened. And that's why FDR, the whole ruling class, were shitting themselves and saying, oh my God, we're about to become Soviet America. What do? Labor peace. We purchase it. So we purchase off most of the working class. We give them a little bit of a house and a nice cul-de-sac and a car and some different kind of products. And yeah, we tax a little bit more so they can have better educational institutions and infrastructure. And then they won't get so radical. And that happened. That's how they bought it off. But now, of course, slowly, since the neoliberal turn, we're talking 60s and 70s. Yeah, of course. And then especially under Reagan, all that stuff was sold off, package all those good union jobs, ship them off somewhere else. And then the corporations are getting rich again. And then everybody's wondering why we're back in a phase when everybody thinks, yeah, socialism, it sounds like a good alternative. Yeah, because the Keynesianism of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, sort of the New Deal and then the Marshall Plan in Europe, which is why all the Scandinavian countries look like they do, why Germany looks like it does, is because we rebuilt them. We rebuilt them in our own image, but we quickly lost that image. They retained some of it. But we quickly were like, yeah, no, we're done with this. Wall Street, come on over. You know? And so when you tell people like this, when you have conversations with people, people say, yeah, I heard something about my granddad saying this, or my grandmom was involved, or, and then of course people begin to say there's a different narrative and they're not telling us. And why aren't they telling us? Why aren't they sharing this history? Because it's a part of our history. It's a huge part of US history.
Well, and that's, I got to have lunch with Howard Zinn's son.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't want to make the entire conversation about his dad, but obviously I had some questions and he knew I did. And he was gracious enough to field some of them. And I said, where was the biggest butting of heads for your father throughout his career? What was like the biggest, issue that he had? And he said the biggest thing for my dad, and this was the case from the beginning until the day he died, was that there was this struggle, even in the academic world, on what exactly history is. And my dad entertains the idea that everybody tells the story of history, not just the powerful. And some of his colleagues, too many of them apparently, thought, well, the powerful get to tell the history. And that's not the way it should be. And that's why books like The People's History of the United States are so essential and important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you tell a working class history from below, right? Because ultimately all the buildings, all the roads, all the infrastructure is built by working class women and men, not by the ruling class. I always joke with farmers around here. I say, do you think Donald Trump could pitch a bale of hay and milk a cow at 4 a.m.? I mean, come on. The ruling class has nothing in common.
I'd milk a cow. It'd be the best milk. It'd be the best milk you've ever tasted. I know all the best cows.
It's crazy. I mean, you really think about this stuff, and people, sometimes you just have to have a conversation with them, not fighting, not being aggressive, but simply saying, do these people have your best interests in mind? And eventually, and I talk to Trump supporters all the time. I mean, there's a lot of Trump supporters in my town. And you talk to them, and people have messaged me and said they're going to vote for me. Why? Because I'm talking about the real stuff. I said, well, yeah. I said, I'm not a billionaire. I'm not a millionaire. I'm a farmer. I'm out there in the mornings with the goats and the sheep and everything. I take care of the chickens, we just harvested all the corn and everything that we had. I said, I'm all like you. I don't have a fancy car or anything. I don't understand. Like, who do you want to represent you? Who do you think has your best interests in mind? I said, it's people who live like you, who suffer like you, who have debt like you. Like, we are all saddled with debt, not only mortgages, student loans, everybody's suffering these days. And so I said, think about this. All those kids, they'd never go fight in a war. A lot of the rural kids here have fought. National Guard, they went off to war and they fought. I said, Trump's kids haven't gone out. Trump himself didn't go. He's so big bad against socialism and communism. When he had his chance to go kill, the Vietnamese who were fighting for their self-determination under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh and the Vietnamese Communist Party, Donald Trump could have gone there and tried to shoot some communists. He didn't. But the communists in Vietnam gave the US a shellacking and sent them packing, So I always tell them, I said, who has your best interests in mind? Who's really fighting for you? And who are you fighting for when they send you off to all these wars? Who's getting rich off of these things? And are you enjoying any of that? Any of the fruits of all that blood, sweat, tears, everything you give to some supposed beautiful country? I'm going to fight for democracy and freedom. I said, you're not fighting for that. You're fighting, you're fighting for the oil companies. You're fighting for the big banks. You're fighting for all the industry. That's what you're doing, And of course, you talk to people like this, they're like, yeah, Smedley Butler said it, over a century ago.
Oh, yeah. He wrote the book. He laid it out. He's like, here's the people who are getting rich. And that's all this is about. This isn't about democracy. This is about a couple people are getting really rich off of this system. And if we don't stop it, it's going to get even worse and worse and worse. And then it did. We have an entire economy built on war now.
We do.
Which is not only morally disgusting on every level, it's also completely unsustainable.
Of course. Of course, how many more countries are we going to pillage? And when are we going to have to start using nuclear weapons to get our things, and our whatever the ruling class wants accomplished? It's very scary. I'm telling you, I talked to everybody. I said, listen, we might have a lot of issues. People are talking about civil war in this country. I said, I'm worried about something else. Nuclear weapons. Think about all the countries that have nuclear weapons out there, and think about all the ruling class interests that are competing and all the contradictions. Somebody could do something stupid. It just came out that Trump wanted to assassinate Bashar al-Assad. I said, okay, you don't have to agree with Assad. Assad is the leader of Syria now. Yeah, he is fighting against all the jihadist forces that have been supported by US, Israel, Saudis, UAE, all this stuff. I said, yeah, but we can't just go assassinate people.
Yeah, we can't just assassinate people around the world.
Coups and regime change. How many countries do we have to do before somebody smacks us over the head? I said, the bully is there. It never ends well. It never does.
Yeah.
I don't understand. And I have no clue when I'm debating, we just had a forum with the sitting Democrat, Peter Welch, and I said, how much more money do we have to spend and how many more wars do we have to lose before we realize that the empire is unsustainable and that all this treasure could be spent supporting people here and helping to build other countries out there?
What was the response to that?
Well, how did your opponents respond? Of course, who's going to say anything? I think I was the only one who ever served in uniform. So, of course, everybody's like,
did you mention that?
Yeah, of course. I mentioned that earlier on.
Man.
My background. They said, what qualifies you? I said, well, I've seen war firsthand. I wore the uniform of this country, and I said, you see all the horrible things that go on behind the scenes,
I can only imagine. When did you serve? Like, what was the time period?
So I commissioned. I was an ROTC, in Army ROTC, and I commissioned as an officer. Graduated airborne school. Did all my training, and then eventually I resigned my commission as a conscientious objector. I said, I'm out of here.
Wow.
And then after that, I ended up volunteering to go fight in Syria against ISIS with the Kurds, with the YPG. And it was there where I saw on the battlefield, firsthand the barbarism of the U.S. assault on Raqqa. And I thought to myself, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Like I want nothing. I came here, I have Kurdish, ancestry, Kurdish background. I said I came here to help with the struggle against the jihadists and things, but I don't want to be on the same side as the U.S. and NATO as they completely decimate a city just to show their might and to try out new weapons and use illegal weapons like white phosphorus. I saw white phosphorus being used on Raqqa, and we looked at other comrades. I said, we protest this stuff when Israel uses it against the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank. Now we're sitting here on the side with the Americans using it. I'm out of here, and eventually, I packed up and left. And you just see, when you see these kind of things, you say, well, what are we spending all this money? Why are people dying? What's going on here? And of course, nobody can say anything, and nobody does say anything because they're all, I said at the end, they're all beholden. All the other candidates are beholden to the military-industrial complex, to all the corporations and the big lobbyists and the big interests that run this country. They're not interested in the working class people, because if you were, you wouldn't send people to go out there and die. Why, for what? Nobody's going to invade us. Who's invading us? We have two oceans and we're bordered by Canada and Mexico. It's going to be, people have this kind of idea like Red Dawn scenario. I said, there's nothing like that's going to happen right now. I cannot fathom how you think that.
It's paranoia at just an obscene level, and so many people. Oh yeah, ISIS is coming to your kid's school. They're gonna be they're gonna be at the front doorstep by lunchtime. You want your kids to have recess? We gotta set the world on fire. That's what we have to do to prevent that. It's like, what planet are you on? You know what you should be worried about? The planet itself. Because you want to talk about a real conflict we have. We have a conflict against climate catastrophe.
Absolutely.
That's the conflict we have.
Absolutely. And to address that, we got to end the war machine. End the war machine. Think about how much fuel is wasted on all these jets and aircraft and all the tanks and all the equipment moving back and forth and training. And why? Okay, everybody shut off the engines, land everything, and let's start cutting back on all this stuff. But they don't want to do it. They don't have a lot of money involved, trillions of dollars. Nobody's going to stop that machine unless the people rise up and seize power. Other than that, these people are going to keep doing what they're doing. Poor people are going to keep going out and dying for all these wars of empire and plunder and all natural resources. We want it all. Screw everybody else. And this is just going to be.
So where can people learn more about you?
So I have a website, www.christopherhalali.com. And I have you can follow me on Twitter at Chris Halali. And really, my biggest thing, it's, I know it's a cliche now, it's not me, it's us, sort of thing from Bernie's camp. But for me, like, people have said, why run now? And I said it's really important to change the conversation. So I encourage everyone, get out there. It doesn't take a lot. Get out there and just start having conversations. And I really encourage people to get out and speak to working class people. Get out and speak to working class farmers. Don't worry. I think that the left sometimes is stuck in a bubble and everybody kind of wants to be on their own. But it's really important to get out there, to talk with people and to have conversations and to not get triggered about everything. People are going to say a lot of shitty things. People say that I have Middle Eastern heritage, my dad's Muslim, they say all sorts of Islamophobic things. Okay, it takes time for people to learn. You slowly break down those walls and barriers. So, okay, well, that's not actually the right thing. It's that my dad's a good man, this, that, and you slowly, people say, oh, okay, maybe they're not all bad, or maybe these aren't bad people at all. Maybe I'm the one who's being, propagandized and somebody's trying to brainwash me. So I think it's really important that people speak to working class people, that people, take the time to engage with the people who are going to transform this country. Because ultimately, that's who we have to be talking to, not the elites who graduated from Ivy League schools who debate each other on the smallest minutia of theory. I mean, I don't fucking care. Working class people don't have time to read all the theory, but talk to them about the real issues, and I guarantee you'll get an audience.
All right. Well, ChristopherHalali.com. Everybody check it out. Awesome talking to you, man. This was a really fun conversation.
A pleasure.
And, thanks for going through the news with me. Guys, a couple quick announcements. First of all, tomorrow on the show, Graham Elwood's going to be here with me. We're going to be getting our news on together, Graham Elwood and myself, because we got a show on Friday. Graham Elwood and I are doing a Zoom show to benefit Flappers Comedy Club. Our live venues, they have taken a hit upon hit this year. Live venues are really suffering. So we're going to do a show with Flappers, and all the ticket sales are going to them to help support the staff and everyone who's really struggling right now. So you can get tickets for that at my website, romplacone.com. Also, guys, yesterday on the show, we talked about what's going on in Denver, where protest organizers involved with the Socialist Party for Liberation were arrested at their homes. We talked to Rodolfo Cortez about that yesterday. I just tweeted out a petition to release those protest organizers. So you can find that petition on my Twitter. Please make sure you're following me at Romplacone, and please do sign that petition. We'll be back tomorrow. Again, check out Chris's website, ChristopherHalali.com, to learn more about him. We'll see you tomorrow. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace. Peace.